Welcome back to Fox Explainer. Today I am going to show you a thriller, mystery movie from 2018 called I Still See You. Spoilers ahead. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more content like this. Watch out and take care. In the city of Chicago, an accident called the event happens. When a big particle collider at Ashburn Laboratories explodes and kills everyone in the city, Chicago is now a no-go zone. The event also has a big effect on the rest of the world. Every house now has a panic room, and most importantly, the ghosts of the people who died during the event are showing up everywhere. People call these ghosts remnants or REMs, and there are rules about how they act. They aren't conscious, they are just projections of the past. They can't change their images. They are stuck in small loops that repeat every day for just a couple of minutes before they disappear. And they can't change the real world. 10 years later, there's a rumor that new REMs are showing up, but the government denies it. In Jewel City, which is 50 miles from Chicago, a teenage girl named Veronica Calder survived the event, but she lost her father Robert. But his remains show up every morning at the table, but her mother Anna refuses to acknowledge them. Later at school, Veronica is taking a class about REMs by August Bittner. She asks him why it's said that REMs can only come from victims of the event when new ones are showing up, like the ghost girl in the classroom. But Mr. Bittner doesn't have an answer. During lunch, Veronica's attention keeps going to Kirk, an unfriendly boy who is obsessed with REMs. He spends all day hunched over his notebook, and everyone knows he was kicked out of his last school, but nobody knows why. When the sun goes down, Veronica decides to spend the evening ice skating on the lake and thinking about all the good times she had here with her dad. The next morning, after she's finished showering, Veronica finds a new REM in her bathroom. The shock makes her fall. A young man looks at himself in the mirror, and just before he disappears, he raises his hand as if to write something. To Veronica's surprise, he does. For a few seconds, the word run also shows up in the mirror. Later in class, she is too distracted to pay attention, and her classmates point out that her ear is bleeding, which is a very obvious thing to notice. The school nurse checks on Veronica but finds nothing wrong, so she decides to try to talk to Mr. Bittner about the strange REM she found in her bathroom. After school, Mr. Bittner asks Veronica to come to his house, where she meets his daughter Eva, who ignores them. Mr. Bittner doesn't believe Veronica when she tells him what she saw in the mirror. Since Veronica had fallen and hit her head, Mr. Bittner thinks she had a concussion and was making things up. Later that night, Veronica waits in the bathroom for Brian, but he doesn't show up. The next day, Veronica decides to follow Kirk around because she thinks his obsession might have the answers she needs. Veronica and Kirk set up the machine in the bathroom while they wait for Brian. When they hear a strange sound, Veronica goes downstairs to look and sees a man in the mirror. She runs back to Kirk for help when she sees something moving out of the corner of her eye. When they go downstairs again, they only find Dana. Veronica tries to think of a reason to tell her mom, but just then Kirk looks at the clock and runs back to the bathroom, so Veronica closely follows him. Kirk does get a picture of Brian before things get weird. Brian's face starts to rot, and he jumps them by turning around at the same time the light bulb explodes, making him vanish. Kirk looks at the picture the next day to find out who Brian is. It turns out that Brian took the pastor's daughter Mary and killed her 4 years ago. Kirk and Veronica go to ask the pastor some questions, but she only knows the basics. Brian followed Mary around campus, and one day he went up to her there. Brian talked her into going with him after they had a fight, and that was the last time anyone saw Mary alive. The next day, after they found Mary, the police found Brian in a motel, but Brian had already ended things for himself. Veronica and Kirk start to learn more about Brian. They figure out that he wasn't from around here because Jewel City is small and no one knew him. Mary probably didn't know him either. Mary went missing the day before her birthday, which is February 29th, also known as Leap Day, which is also Veronica's birthday. The two people are doing this research in the library, where a mysterious shadow is watching them without them noticing. When that shadow goes away, the lights start to flicker, and Veronica drops her notebook. When she opens it, she sees the word run written over and over on each page, but she didn't do it. Later, Kirk is called into the principal's office to be told off for bothering the pastor. Kirk tells him that it's for a school project, but the principal doesn't believe him. Veronica is at the school basketball game, worried that Kirk won't show up or answer her messages. The principal is there, but he leaves through the stairs when he gets a text message. During the game, Veronica starts to see Brian appear in the middle of the crowd and then in a room across the court. After failing to talk to him from the stands, Veronica starts crossing the court to get to him. She is too busy to notice that she is stopping the game. When she finally wakes up, something very disturbing happens. The body of the principal falls through the roof. In the evening, Kirk goes to see Veronica to talk about a worry he has. He told the principal the real reason they talked to the pastor, and the principal promised to help, but now he's dead. Kirk is sure that these two things are related, but Veronica doesn't think so. When Kirk finds Veronica's ice skates, she tells him that her dad used to have them and tells him her last memory of him. On the day of the event, she yelled at Robert and told him she didn't love him. On top of that, Robert usually took the train to work, but when he was late, he drove. Because of his fight with Veronica, he was late that morning, so he took the car and was on the freeway when the event happened. If he had taken the train, the explosion wouldn't have reached him, so Veronica thinks it's her fault that his father died. That's why she's never been to his grave. Kirk isn't doing much better with his family. He never cried for his father, and the reason he tracks Rems is because he's still waiting for his father's ghost to show up. Veronica and Kirk are almost kissing while they are talking, but Anna interrupts them and offers Kirk the sofa bed because it's too late to drive and the roads are icy. Later that night, Brian is at Veronica's window, reaching for her. She takes a step back, trips on a thin layer of ice, and falls into the lake. Veronica sees two ghostly women in the water. After a series of strange visions, she wakes up in her bed and realizes it was all a dream. Anna tells Veronica in the morning that she has an interview in Overton on the 28th. This makes Veronica sad because her mom won't be there for her birthday. Kirk sees something very strange when Robert's ghost shows up as usual. The newspaper the ghost is holding is from a date after Robert died. Kirk reads an article about Emma and Claire, two girls who went missing and died. He writes down the details while coming to the conclusion that Robert is trying to get close to Veronica. They look for information online and find out that the girls went missing on Leap Day each year. They go to see Claire's sister, who is still around. She tells them that Brian was Claire's boyfriend and that she was crazy about him. She was so crazy about him that she moved to Chicago soon after meeting him. When she says that Claire's REM shows her death, Veronica and Kirk don't think twice about going to see it, even if it means going into the no-go zone. When they get to Chicago, they find Veronica's dream lake. But the most surprising thing is seeing how many REMs are all over the city and how they don't go away after a few seconds. Kirk thinks that since this is ground zero, the energy that brings them here must be stronger, so the REMs can have longer loops. All of a sudden, a group of real people shows up. They are just a bunch of drunk and annoying thugs. Kirk pushes Veronica against the wall and kisses her, acting like they are REMs. This makes the thugs leave them alone, even the one who almost uses a knife on them as a test. Then, they go to the address Claire's sister gave them and find that it's the lab where the event happened. A man at the door charges them to see the famous REM of the dying girl, and as Veronica and Kirk go downstairs, they see ghosts from when this building wasn't yet a lab, including the girls from Veronica's dream. Eventually, they get to a room where regular people are waiting to see the REM. Claire's ghost shows up happy and talking to someone they can't see, which shows that she knew who killed her. Claire is thrown around all of a sudden, and she tries to get away by climbing a staircase. When she gets to the top, the attacker chokes her to death, and the REM disappears. Kirk sees Dr. Martin Steiner, who was in charge of the experiment that led to the event, in the crowd and calls his name. Steiner runs away because he doesn't want to be found. Kirk and Veronica follow him until they corner him in an alley. Steiner pulls a gun on the teens, but Veronica doesn't let him scare her. Instead, she tells him to shoot, since she can't protect herself if she doesn't know what to do. This makes Steiner agree to tell them his story as he takes them back inside. When the bombs went off in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the shadows of the people who died were burned into the walls. These echoes we leave behind when we die can become something more, like a doorway through which the dead could talk to the living. Steiner's research was aimed at making one of these doorways so that patients could be brought to the edge of death and back again. But as they got closer, it became more dangerous, and on the day of the event, instead of making a door, they tore a huge hole. Brian was Steiner's brilliant assistant, but something broke in him after the event, so when Claire died, Steiner was sure Brian did it. The girls who died afterward were part of Brian's attempt to use spectral transference to bring Claire back in their bodies. Steiner also confirms that the REM laws they are taught at school are lies, and that all of Brian's victims share Claire's birthday, which is a leap day like Veronica's. Kirk steals a picture of the old lab while Veronica promises they won't say anything, but Steiner can't take the weight of the truth anymore and uses his gun to end things. The next day, Veronica and Kirk go back to school, and on the way, they talk about ways to keep Veronica safe until her birthday is over. But the school administrators are waiting for them to make Kirk open his locker and find a gun inside. Kirk swears it isn't his, but he is taken away anyway. Veronica goes to Mr. Bittner for help because she is scared and desperate. He finally believes her because he has talked to the pastor. He also tells her that Kirk was kicked out of his last school because a gun was found on him. After hearing about Steiner, Mr. Bittner decides that running away won't help, so he comes up with an idea. They'll put lead lining in Veronica's panic room, which is supposed to keep Rems from getting in. Kirk tries to talk to Veronica the next day because she has been avoiding his calls. But Veronica isn't sure she can trust him anymore, even though he admits that he did have a gun at his old school, but that he didn't use it to hurt anyone but himself. Before she and Bittner get the room ready for her to hide in, Veronica tells Kirk to leave. While Lana is at her job interview, no one at the company has called her. Kirk is looking into the picture he stole from Steiner and finds out that Bittner used to work at the lab, but he can't tell Veronica because her phone doesn't work in the panic room. Instead, he drives to Bittner's house to confirm his thoughts. Eva is a Rem who died at Ground Zero. Since she has a very long loop, Bittner wants to bring her back in Veronica's body. Speaking of Bittner, he finds Kirk outside, knocks him out, and takes him away to bury him alive. After that, Bittner goes back to Veronica's house, pretending to protect her. But Veronica suddenly remembers the tools they used to take Brian's picture and realizes this is a trap. Veronica pushes Bittner and runs out of the room, but Bittner quickly catches up with her and grabs her by the hair as he tells her everything he did for the sake of his daughter. He was the one who killed all the girls, faked Hannah's job interview, put the gun in Kirk's locker, and killed both Brian and the principal. Brian had taken the girls somewhere else to keep them safe, but Bittner still found them. Bittner puts his hands around Veronica's neck, but Robert's Rem shows up and takes his attention away. Veronica grabs one of her skates from under the couch and uses it to hurt Bittner and push him off the couch before running away. She finally makes it to the frozen lake, and when Bittner catches her from behind, Veronica kicks the ice until it breaks, and they both fall into the water. Bittner keeps trying to kill Veronica, but suddenly two Rems show up. Brian, who helps Veronica get to the surface, and Mary, who grabs Bittner and pulls him down until he drowns. After Veronica thanks Brian for his help, Brian leaves. Unfortunately, the ice is too slippery for Veronica to hold on properly and get out of the freezing water, so she starts to think about her dad while she waits for death to come. At that moment, Kirk shows up and helps her out, saying that more help is on the way. The fact that he was able to get away is pretty amazing. His dad's Rem finally showed up and dug up the grave. Veronica goes back to her normal life when her dad's Rem stops showing up. This gives her the courage she needed to finally visit Robert's grave. After that, she and Kirk agree that they must find a way to tell the world the truth, while Bittner's Rem watches them from a distance. That's all for now. I hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe for more and hit the like button to help me out, and also leave a comment if you want me to explain your favorite film. Until next time, take care.